All right, hi everyone. I'm Peter. I'm a postdoc. I was a grad student and a postdoc at a Marone group. We're experimentalist at chemistry department. So today I'm going to show you how we build a modular platform, simulation platform for magnetic resonance force microscopy, MRFM experiments. We'll show two packages, mrfmsim and its backend mmodel. So I want to start out with the motivation. So we are a graduate school experimentalists, so code quality is not often a priority. Typically what we do is something quick and dirty. We want to get more data, we want to do more experiments, not analyze all the time. So I'll paint you a picture how we used to do simulations. So if you want to do a new experiment, if you want to create a new experiment, say like there's new physics or there's new parameters, what we typically do is we go to find something that already exists. Right? We try to search for script that already shares most common parts. So in our case, it would be a Jupyter Notebook script, and we just find parts and then try to change some of it, and hopefully it works. If it works, it's production. So problem with this approach is, first, we don't emphasize on comments. So whatever people left there, it's there. We only change parts that we want to. And there's really no emphasis on tests. So this approach is very error prone. You can imagine error propagate from previous script to the current one. There's lack of tests, so you have errors from there. It's not readable because it's basically a Frankenstein combination of different people's script, and turns out it's very slow and difficult to optimize because of all these problems, and you spend way more time on debugging. So it's really not quick and dirty. It's not quick, and it's definitely very dirty because the life of tests actually led to a publication error we had. So in 2009, you can see this paper in PNAS. Quote, the numerical simulation agrees remarkably well with the observed signal. So the signal is in black and simulation is blue. So this is really a simulation of signal over a thin film of sample. So these figures are just see the active signal distribution. So it turns out if you do a careful simulation, the grid voxel size was too large, so it's accidentally agreed result. If you actually carefully do this simulation, you can see the colored lines are the actual correct simulation. It does not fit the experimental data at all. So this was a key motivation for us to create something new. And I want to ask a question, can we create a modular simulation package for MRFM that is a new technique? It's under constant development and in a graduate research setting, right? Can we create a simulation platform that can help reduce the errors? Obviously, we want to establish some sort of guidelines for coding, but I think on the other hand, we want to have the simulation package itself help to reduce the errors. And I want to emphasize this because a lot of talks you're going to hear, or the ones previous, is people develop packages for already established techniques. So you already know, so all these models are well-defined. And this is typically not addressed in a lot of these industry softwares. So in this talk, I'll give a brief overview of how MRFM work and challenges in modeling these experiments. And because of time, I'm only going to highlight some of the features that we designed to resolve some of these challenges. So the goal of magnetic resonance force microscopy is to have high-resolution 3D image of individual biomolecules and protein assembly. This is very important for biological studies, for drug design and drug delivery systems. And typically, these days, you would think about two major techniques to get these high-resolution 3D image. So one is cryo-EM, use electron microscopy, and the other is super-resolution optical microscopy. So this optical microscopy uses fluorescence labels, so they have their own limitations. So cryo-EM, it needs a lot of identical samples, so you see the picture, you just need essentially a statistical analysis of multiple copies, and it has sample damage. So the optical microscopy are resolution limited, typically about 10 nanometer. So our proposed MRFM experiment can potentially achieve sub-angstrom resolution, and we use electrons. So for one of the example of the experiment, we use electron radical spin labels, nitric oxide, to image these 3D structures. So the key is to detect the position of these single spins. So I'll give briefly how it works. So imagine a spin has a magnetic moment. When it's under external field, there's an energy splitting between the spin up and spin down. So if you apply a transverse field that matches the energy splitting, you can flip the spin from spin up to spin down. For example, for electron spin, the gyromagnetic ratio of 28 gigahertz per Tesla, what it means is at 1 Tesla external field, you apply a transverse field that matches 28 gigahertz, the spin will flip. So similarly, if we keep the microwave, the field microwave 28 gigahertz constant, at 1 Tesla, you can flip the spin. Right? So what you see here, also there's a little line width. That's due to the relaxation. That's external. That's intrinsic property of the spin. So all these numbers just means we can actually get to a good resolution at 1 angstrom. And for this type of experiment, we can get really good signal noise in 1 second signal averaging. So I want to show you an animation that I made, kind of try to explain this experiment. It's a little intro. So here we model or sample with 5 spheres of spins. So these are individual spins. So if we apply external field, the spin tends to align with the external field, so it points up. So now if we apply a microwave, so that creates a transverse field, that if it matches exactly, like shown in the previous slide, it will flip. And when it matches energy, it will flip the spin. So what it looks like is spin will keep processing. And when you apply the microwave field, you flip from spin up to spin down. So this is how we change the spin and how when we try to detect the flip. So what you saw was, oh sorry, and then if they don't match, nothing will happen. Only happens when it's at resonance condition. So what you saw was a bulk spin change. So how do we isolate, like the particular individual spins that we want to image? So this is where the tip comes in. So the tip has a cantilever, which is, oscillates, and has a tip magnet, creates a tip field. So what this means is the resonance condition now changes. Only the ones that's inside the actual tip field will flip. If you notice the frequency of the cantilever, when the spin flips, the cantilever frequency changes. So it will change back again when it's flipped back. Right? So this is how we isolate these spins and how we detect through the cantilever frequency change. Yep. So lastly, I want to show what the image would look like. So because this bowl-shaped tip field, the points by function is actually a circle, and it's dependent. So the diameter is dependent on the spin depth, and the location obviously is where the spin is at. So you can see the process is fairly complex, and simulation is very crucial to do the experiment and to understand, to reconstruct the data as well. So I want to move on to the challenges that we're facing to build a simulation for this technique. So you've seen in the animation, typically this experiment contains these common components. So you have a resonator. So for us, it's a cantilever that's mechanically detect the spin flip. We have a tip magnet that creates the differential field. We have external field. And we have the sample that's the spin. And we have some sort of microwave or radio frequency source. Depends on the spin property. In addition, because we're a new technique, different groups are actively trying different components. So for resonator, people are doing cantilevers, people are doing membrane resonators. There are different magnets in geometry, materials, different samples, even different setups. So what you saw is the magnet is on the cantilever. Sometimes some other groups will do the sample on the cantilever. So this really pushed us to a kind of modular simulation package, because since we have all these sort of common components, we want something that's fixed, but also we can interchange these parts if we want to use a different type of component for simulation. But the difficulty for a completely fixed is that we also on the development phase. That means there's a lot of different protocols as well. So I've shown here 2 different protocols that's actively being used in different groups. One is a Kermit. It's basically just ESR, electron spin resonance experiment, and there's one cyclic inversion. It's a different type of protocol. So you can see here, they share some common components, but the process is completely different, and we also getting different sort of measurement in the end. So here is shown there's even more different protocols. So we want this package to be flexible. So we can't just have a fixed sequence of process that we swap out components, because the whole protocol is just different, and there's so many protocols. And the other thing is we really want it to be readable. We want to be able to quickly understand what this code is doing because of these different protocols. And another key feature we want is some sort of post-definition modification. What this means is, for example, in an experiment, a lot of times we want to do analysis. We want to try vary the frequency we applied and see what happens to the system, or vary the external field. So in this case, we want to loop these parameters. Traditionally, when we try to loop these parameters, we either loop the whole function, or we trying to go into the code and try to see where the best place to place the loop is. Because a lot of these processes are very computationally intensive, you don't want to loop the whole experiment. So we want this to be, so what we want is we don't want to really go into the code every single time, try to find the best place to loop this specific parameter. We want the system to be very flexible to modify after the simulation is defined. And lastly, we are chemistry graduate students. Most of us don't come from a programming background. And we still have limited time. We're not in industry. We don't have full time to forever. So 5 to 7 years is probably the most. And we also need constant collaboration. So we want to share the code constantly with other group people for different experiments, or just for collaboration. So in general, we want it to be very readable, easy to test, run, optimize, and share as well. So in summary, we want this simulation platform to be modular, flexible in terms of structure and for modification, readable, and just easy to use. In addition, we want to be able to use existing code base, because we already define a lot of these physical processes using Python, and we want it to be open source. So I'm going to move on to talk about how we resolve these challenges using M-model and mrfmsim. So one solution to the problem, I think everyone is pretty obvious, is to use a directly acyclic graph. So we represent the node, we represent process using node and the data flow with edges. So in this way, it is very modular. You can interchange nodes. It's very flexible. You can change different graphs. And it's much readable because you have a graph representation and easy to test. So why don't we just use some common or existing workflows, because DAG has been used in a lot of workflows and really is really popular. But the problem, like I said before, is most of these systems are focused on well-defined processes. And a lot of them for HPC or large data analysis. We look around, and there's nothing really worked for us. So we decided to create our own. So the criteria here that different from the other ones is we want it to be lightweight. We really want it to be able to modify after definition, and we want to use external functions instead of defining new functions required for a lot of the workflow system. So we built a model stack-based. The graph is based on network X, and we can visualize using GraphViz. And I'm going to show a bunch of features that we add in the system that help with the challenges. So we're going to use example. This is a very simple math function. Obviously, you can just use one line of code in Python to define this, but I want to emphasize MRFM experiments are much more complex. So here, just a representation. So this is actual code for M model. So idea is we define a graph, and then we convert the graph to some sort of callables. So we can quickly generate these graphs just using visualize and with all these function metadata. So to run this code, because we want it to be easy to run, you can just call it like any Python function. So, first feature is very important to us because we want to use existing code. So in M model, any function can be used as a node. There's no restriction on what callable that is. So NumPy, built-in Lambda, or even the model you created from the M model. So what you do is it's really a thin wrap to create a node object. Essentially what it does is change the signature a little bit and then define the output. So this is lightweight. The other thing is we have this object called handler that handles data flow, and we can use different handlers. The idea is it gives us flexibility in the future to do different ways to calculate and handle the data. So for example, one way to reduce peak memory usage is to delete values that are no longer being used in the later nodes. So that's one way to do handler. Another is if the data is really large, we can do these intermediate values in HDF5 file. The reason I want to show this is because we can change how these handler functions. We can actually outputs intermediate values, which is very useful when we're trying to do development. So sometimes, in the process, we want to see, okay, what happens to this node? What's the output? So you can just define these in some sort when you create the model. Instead of you go in the code like we used to, and you insert a print statement. Hopefully the thing works. Yeah. And lastly, I want to point out, I think this is the key feature, and this is the reason why we decided to build our own, is the post-definition modification. So the idea is we want to be able to modify these models after definition. So in here, we call modifier is the ones that modify nodes itself, and we call shortcuts is the ones you apply to the whole model. So that's the post-definition one. So just briefly on modifiers, you can add this during node definition or after. For example, you just want to cache this node. You can just add a comment like the cache decorator. So all these modifiers are just functions applied to functions, to the node function. So this gives us the opportunity to do this optimized looping easily. So for example, if we want to loop the parameter b here, we can just create really just one line code to do this. So the idea is we don't want to loop the whole experiment because in actual experiment, maybe the top node is very computationally heavy. There's no need to loop the parameter b here. So what we want is loop the bottom side. So what this ML does is really just find, the first occurrence of the parameter b, and we create sort of we create a subgraph, and we can just run experiment this way. So this really helps us to quickly debug and also generate these experimental spectra. So briefly talking about mrfmsim. So again, the idea is we're graduate students. We don't have like full-time people maintain these projects. So we created a model itself as a backend because we wanted to be able to apply to a lot of different processes. And then we built mrfmsim on top of it, essentially with a lot of specialized tools. So it adds additional modifiers and shortcuts. I'll talk about the plugin and the YAML configuration. So the idea is a bare-bone simulation platform with added features. So the plugin system, the reason, again, we want to do plugin system, we want to strip all these features out so we can focus on maintaining the core functions, and we can have different groups in the community that adds different features to the system. So it uses simple entry points from setup tools. So we have already added our own experiment to the system as a plugin, and command line interface, units, and plotting functions. So another thing is if we want an experiment to be more readable, we actually use configuration files with YAML. What it does here, you can see we have a graph that has edges defined, all these nodes with these outputs and function defined, and obviously the doc string of it. So this way, it's even more readable and it's easier to share with collaborators. So with that, I want to, so with that, I hope I show you a modular simulation platform for developing new experiment techniques. So in this case, mrfm with these two packages. And it is very modular, flexible. It's readable through graph and obviously rich metadata. And we can use extended code base, and it is open source. So we've seen up to about 20-fold speed up for simulation for some processes. And it definitely reduced error and development time. So these packages are available on GitHub. Some of the features might still on the feature branch, but it will be merged to main soon. So when I come back to the problem I talked about at the beginning. So what happened to that experiment? So this is using this is flipped, but it's using the correct simulation, so it doesn't fit the data. So what happens is, remember the animation, when the cantilever is in motion, the spins actually don't have enough time to fully flip. So that creates fully flip. So we actually think about and created a new physics, using the correct physics, we're able to simulate these experiment data very well. So we created these time-dependent offset simulation using the new mrfsim package, and that really helps speed up the development. So lastly, I think future directions. We want to really explore different new techniques and see if we can use M-model and mrsim to apply to their needs. And another thing is, because we're so lightweight, we can easily create conversion kit for these existing models to convert to other popular workflows for other, for process they optimize. So with that, I want to thank my PI, John Moreau, and Michael for helping developing the package, and the contributor that for some of the physics functions, and NIH and Army Research Office for funding. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Sure.
I'll ask. Can you give us a sense of, in the HPC execution environment, what sort of computational resources do you typically need for running these simulations? How long does it run? How much does it hurt to actually run through a simulation?
Yes, so I thought repeat the question. So the question is, in connecting to HPC resources, what resources do you need?
Yeah, so these simulation it's really dependent on the grid size because we're doing the 3D simulation, right? We're doing 3D image. So, and if you think about angstrom resolution in the future, you really want a really small grid size. And so that depends. So the simulation will go up, dramatically. That can't be handled by or computers. So right now, about 1 million data point on computer costs like a minute to run. So if you scale that up, it really will hurt in the future when we get to that resolution in the experiment. So I think that's like sort of down the line. Yes, I think high performance will help in that regard. And because these are 3D sort of data structure, we also probably can benefit a lot from parallel computing and all that kind of stuff. So that's the other thing we are actively trying to look at.
I can also ask a question. So my question would be, who are your envisioned users of the package? And is the package already used outside of your group?
No, the package is not used outside the group. We are the users currently. That's the other thing I want to give the talk, so I wanted to see what other process we can apply this for. Really, like I said, we're a small group. We want community support. If we can use it for more process, that's much easier for maintaining, because I'm going to leave soon, so yeah. So no, not yet.
But are you thinking of contacting other groups who work in the same space, whether they would
Yeah, so we are definitely going to push this to within the community. We already talked to a lot of groups, but I think we're also looking for different new techniques that's still under development. Really looking at helping sort of new, that's not well-established techniques that people are trying to explore. So.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions? All right. Thank you, Peter.
No, thank you.